Hey Sovereigns of the Dojo, I'm looking forward to answering your questions. You've sent in a bunch of good questions. I'll be joining the AMA to try and answer questions live, but because you sent in questions in advance, I'm going to try and answer them in advance and provide you guys with this video. So, the first question is from Ferdy1987, and he says, previously the team has said that exchanges will come to list SOV rather than SOV approaching them. But this won't happen without hype and interest. How do you intend to employ a market maker to gain interest in SOV? So, the Exchequer has already reached out to a market maker. We will be working with Efficient Frontier. And as you guys know, there are exchanges that are interested in listing SOV. I believe that the first exchange is going to list SOV next week, and that we'll see by the end of this month probably one or two other exchanges list SOV as well. And I expect that we'll continue to see more exchanges listing SOV as time goes on. Second question and the third question come from Desmond9898, and he asks, the key to the success of hyper-Bitcoinization is to change the mindset of people looking at BTC RBTC as a store of value. People are reluctant to part with their BTC as it forms their long-term core holding. Apart from utilizing an incentive-driven model, how does Sovryn intend to change that given its focus for DeFi for Bitcoin? So that's a great question. I think what we've already seen is that people are willing to invest their BTC. People want to invest their BTC in projects which they believe in, and particularly projects which are Bitcoin related. I mean, Sovryn raised quite a lot of money in Bitcoin. Babelfish have done the same thing, but it is a good question. I think one of the goals for Sovryn is to be the best place to use Bitcoin as a financial asset, the best place to earn more Bitcoin on your Bitcoin. And so even when people are making an investment in SOV, the long-term goal of Sovryn is that it will pay out to SOV stakers who are participating in governance, and what it pays out is primarily going to be the profits of the Sovryn protocol in the form of BTC. I think there is a challenge in changing the mind share of people away from thinking of Bitcoin as purely a passive thing. But I think that the base of passive holding is what gives Bitcoin its value. And on top of that, our goal is to build a financial system. And really, people who are holding Bitcoin passively, right, and that's like $1 trillion worth of value, want to be able to earn yield while they're holding. And I think Sovryn provides a unique way to do that. Second question that Desmond asks, on team formation and setup. Sovryn is quite an ambitious project for just a few members of the core team. Yeah, that's true. In addition, Sovryn is going to be listed on CEXs soon. New investors will be looking at Sovryn. Can you share a bit more of your experience of the core team and their setup, the Circle of Light, for example? Yes, so there's an effort right now to try and create a more open mapping of the different teams, the different circles, and how they interrelate. One of the reasons this hasn't happened yet is because we've been moving so fast on other things. There actually is a mapping, but I don't think it is up to date. But this is a good point. It would be really great for everyone inside the team and outside, just everyone involved in the community, to more easily be able to see who's in which circle, what are the different circles working on. What you can do is you can go to the GitHub and you can see the Trello boards, not Trello boards, like the task boards that the different teams have, and so that will give you a good sense of what the different teams on the development side are working on. Question number 3 is from Yuri Bras. So Ascendex is investing $9 million in Sovryn. Do you have any dates for the investment, or did it already take place? So Ascendex didn't invest $9 million. They participated, they've made an investment in Sovryn as part of a syndicate, and specifically they joined the Anthony Pompliano syndicate. That investment has already taken place. And they're looking to try and participate in the Sovryn ecosystem as a strategic partner. Question number 4 from Derek Prasil, I think. Is a CEX listing for Sov in your plan? And I'd like to know if Yago knows CZ from Binance personally. So yes, as I mentioned, a CEX listing is not in our plan, but it is happening. And I do know CZ, but not very well. I've met him only a few times. Question number 5 from Year13. What exchanges are most feasible to list SOV or fish in the future, and why those? So I think we would expect main, the top tier exchanges eventually to list SOV, and then potentially other tokens in the Sovryn ecosystem. But I think if you want a hint on which exchanges are likely to list SOV, you can go look at, for example, the Anthony Pompliano syndicate or other exchanges, like who is part of that, who is listed as part of that, and also other exchanges that have been tweeting about Sovryn. Question number 6. What's your take on the developments? Is it going according to schedule? Any difficulty or issues that affect the timeline of certain developments? So the development timeline for Sovryn is extremely aggressive, and as Desmond mentioned, the team is quite small given the amount of stuff that's been happening, the core team, and part of the reason the core team is able to deliver so much is because they're also ecosystem teams, other teams from the community who are working on different things. There's one big thing which is way behind schedule, and that is the ability to do a roll-up, and I think there's some questions about scalability, so we'll discuss that in a moment. And that isn't just for us, it's for everyone in the entire crypto space. I think roll-ups have proven to be more difficult than originally anticipated, and this is particularly true for optimistic rollups, which I think are also proving to be less useful than anticipated. So I think we are expecting to have zero knowledge rollup probably not before the end of this year, but soon after. And I think that's the number one thing that's slower than expected. The other thing is two-way fast BTC. So being able to use fast BTC to move funds in the other direction, so back into Bitcoin main chain, has been taking a little bit longer, but I think we're getting pretty close. Other than that, I think most of the things on our roadmap we've been hitting. It's quite impressive, actually. And in many ways, like the whole sub-DAO or sub-protocol thing, it is a new development, and it's a big development that wasn't on our roadmap. And that kind of emerged from something else that wasn't on our roadmap, which is Origins. So when an ecosystem like this is developing, you can't really predict how it's going to develop. You can have a sense, but it takes shape as it's moving, and so I think what's exciting about Sovryn is that it is taking shape in surprising and exciting ways, but also that it is moving so rapidly. He also asks, so Vinny Vince asks, tokenomics seems to be a major worry of the community, often regarded as a large contributing factor for the depreciation of the price of SOV. What is the dev's view on this, and what are the plans to address it? Marketing is set to launch in Q4. Any additional info on that? So I think the tokenomics of SOV is great, actually. I think there's been a lot of thought that has gone into how to structure the system so that there's the right set of incentives. We see a large number of people staking SOV. We see a large number of people participating in the votes of the Bitocracy. But at the same time, there are a lot of SOV being unlocked over time, right? So how do you manage that? Well, the Sovryn ecosystem and the Sovryn narrative need to grow with that. I don't think that the price so far has really been impacted by that, not for good or bad. I think the price really has been completely disconnected from everything else that's going on in the crypto space. It went up very, very fast, too fast initially, has now found some kind of level, and this is a long-term project, so we're going to need to see how it plays out going forward. But I think as much larger audiences are brought into the Sovryn world, right, through CEX listings, through the other protocols that are launching, through sales that will occur on origins, and as the Sovryn interfaces and protocols improve, we're going to see more growth. And I also expect that CEX listings will connect SOV, for good and for bad, much more closely to the price of Bitcoin and the price and sort of the way prices move in the rest of the ecosystem. So when the rest of the ecosystem goes up, SOV will go up. When the rest of the ecosystem goes down, SOV will go down. There is going to be a higher level going forward of correlation between SOV and the wider market. As for marketing, marketing is an ongoing process. There's a new, really motivated Bitcoiner who's got great experience in marketing called Malva, who's joined and will be leading the adoption team and the marketing from, has already started, but really it's going to take the lead starting in October. And I think you guys have probably already seen that there's already more conversation, more things happening around SOV, and particularly around Sovryn. Question number 7. When Sovryn transitions to Lightning, will staking rewards become more frequent? So 2 things here. First, Sovryn is not going to transition to Lightning. It will integrate with Lightning. It is going to work across multiple different parts of the Bitcoin Layer 2 ecosystem, including Lightning, including maybe one-day stacks, including roll-up. And the staking rewards actually happen all the time. I think what you're referring to are the sort of additional SOV rewards that are offered by the Exchequer, and those will continue to be every 2 weeks. So that was from Mike. Question number 8 is from Matt Brand. How does Sovryn dev team plan on helping Rootstock scale so that the Sovryn platform can handle millions of users one day? So I don't think Rootstock can ever handle millions of users just on its own. And that is why Sovryn is integrating scaling systems like the Zero Knowledge, the ZK Rollup, like Lightning, and potentially other technologies in the future. At the same time, in terms of helping to scale Rootstock right now, the team is working to help the RSK team improve their nodes. We are have built out, sort of like the core team have built out load balancing and various systems like caching, which will allow much smoother, much higher reliability transactions. And already we've seen that. There was a problem with Babelfish, but that was mainly because it was just after the hard fork, and so all of the systems hadn't adapted yet to the new node system. But broadly speaking, even on days of high load, Sovryn holds up very nicely. D. Saroy asks, you have mentioned that Sovryn is chain agnostic and is open to moving to whichever chain or solution best suits our vision. So what other chains or avenues outside of Rootstock are you looking at or keeping your eye on? Would love to know of trade-offs and key criteria you're looking for. So it's funny that D. Saroy is asking this because I recently had a conversation with him about RGB and how you can use RGB maybe to build smart contracts on Lightning. I think our approach is very pragmatic, and at the same time as being pragmatic, Sovryn is very principled. And so the key principle is have the highest degree of security, which means that ultimately your security should roll up to Bitcoin. Don't create new altcoins because they're nonsense. And so long as you can do those things, you can use any technology that's out there. And so I think we've provided a roadmap of where we think this is going in the near future. I think Zero Knowledge Rollup is going to be extremely powerful technology. Basically allow the system to operate at the speed of a centralized system. And then introducing things like Lightning Network and potentially RGB and better pegs can allow you to even more increase the security of the Bitcoin that is in the system. So the approach here is, be willing to take the best technology anywhere, continue to build on it, improve it, make sure it's secure and safe, and make sure that you're always moving towards providing people with better ways of using their Bitcoin. Question number 10. How will XUSD and Babelfish fit in with the Zero token on the Sovryn platform? They're both stablecoin projects, right? So Zero is not a stablecoin project. Zero, however, will be helping to generate a Bitcoin-backed stablecoin. We don't know yet what it's going to be called, but there are a bunch of different ideas for that. But it's probably going to be launched. There's a good chance it might be launched in October already. XUSD and the Bitcoin-backed stablecoin, which right now we're calling the Sovryn dollar, will coexist. And they have totally different risk profiles. And so the idea of having them both coexist is that people can choose which one they want to use, which one is more useful to them, which one has the risk profile that they're willing to accept. We're going to be working, I think, as a community to try and make the Bitcoin-backed stablecoin the standard in Sovryn and in other places as well. But people still will want XUSD because it's an easier way to get funds in and out of the system. And so I think you need to have both, and probably they will trade against each other and help keep each other's peg in that way. So that was from Sinido. Then Manitopia asks, what are the greatest obstacles that Sovryn needs to overcome in its path to mass adoption? I think there's a lot of obstacles on the path to mass adoption. There's thousands, right? Just like Bitcoin has infinite number of obstacles, FUD and hard to use wallets and difficult to understand the use case, and etc., 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 right? Sovryn has the same thing. But both of these ultimately benefit from the same thing. They're open source. They continue to improve. Anyone can plug in. Anyone can improve the wallets. Any exchange can list them. And Sovryn has the additional benefit of it will grow with Bitcoin. So for Sovryn to succeed, what we need to do is two things. We need to become the best platform, the best protocol for using your Bitcoin, and we need to, and that includes tying, making it, connecting Sovryn and Bitcoin as tightly as possible, reducing the friction. So the two-way fast BTC is one thing, but connecting with Bitcoin wallets, or anything that you reduce user frictions, connecting with Lightning Network, those are all important things. And at the same time, building out an ecosystem where you have more wallets that are integrated, you have more projects that are integrated, you have more use cases. And I think if you look at what Sovryn is doing, we're very, very, very early in the process, but that's exactly the path that we're on. Those are exactly the things that the Sovryn community is building. Mahan Vaez asks, considering the level of attention crypto has absorbed, it is clear that governments want to regulate it as hard and as tight as possible. With that in mind, and considering Sovryn's goals and ideals, and what just Uniswap was pushed to do, change the gateway website, how do you think we can counter the censorship happening to the website gateways or any other solutions? So there's so many things that Sovryn does to make sure it's permissionless. First of all, there's no company. Second of all, there's no leader. There's no one in control. Everything goes through the Bitocracy. No one can shut down the system. If we pause the system, a SIP can restart it, so the community can restart the system. There's multiple different back-end systems that are being used. The website, Sovryn.app, is fully open source. Other projects are building their own front ends. The whole system is being designed so that there's no central point of failure anywhere. And when there's no central point of failure anywhere, two things happen. First of all, there's no one and nothing to regulate. And second, even if a regulator does try to shut something down, they can't. There's no possibility to do it. What do you shut down, right? You can't control anything. There's no lever that you can shut down. One really important thing that we're doing, for example, just as an example of this, is the sovereign dollar, right? So everyone needs to be able to have fiat to operate in our current world. And maybe that won't be the case in 10 years, but right now it is the case. But any form of fiat is censorable. And so, for many years I've been saying if we can get uncensorable stablecoins, it's game over, because now you have something which is non-volatile, which you can use to pay the rent, which you can, convert into fiat at any time. But there's no one to stop. It's just a fully automated system. And so even the Bitcoin-backed stablecoins are another tool to make sure that this system can never be censored. If you look at what happened to Ethereum, Ethereum now is, runs on USDC and Tether. Even MakerDAO runs on USDC. So Ethereum can be censored. If people go after Tether and USDC, they can they have a huge amount of leverage over the entire Ethereum ecosystem. By introducing the sovereign dollar and making it the most powerful stable coin in the system, we can avoid that. Even XUSD avoids that, because it is an aggregated asset, which there's no one's actually using USDT, or almost no one's using USDC on Sovryn, right? They're using XUSD, and so Circle can't blacklist or force you to only use KYC addresses, because they don't control the XUSD. They only control the USDC, which is in the bridge, and so they can't really. It's not even on Rootstock. So there's so many layers of how you build out the censorship resistance. Crypto Bumble asks, concerning the threshold level of the platform, you constantly talk about the Sovryn platform as a platform for everyone, not just professionals. As a relative noob myself, I am afraid that Sovryn won't appeal to the masses, as it requires more than entry-level research and knowledge to navigate the platform. For example, how do I use fast BTC, or anything that has to do with the Rootstock sidechain in general? How do you and the Sovryn team make sure that your expert knowledge is represented via the intricate features of the platform and doesn't get too overwhelming for newbies? The success of Sovryn seems to be connected to the Rootstock network. During the launch, we saw that the network was not able to handle all the transactions at once. How will this weakness of Rootstock be solved? So I think one cool thing, if you look at Sovryn, and the way everything is being integrated together, even now, when it's like really just 4 months old, it looks more like a centralized exchange than any DeFi platform, right? You go in and you can borrow, you can lend, you can trade. There's a lot there that needs to be improved. It's very, very hard to read data off a blockchain. So our backend and our data analytics aren't as good as a centralized service yet. You have to figure out how to connect your wallet. But once you've connected your wallet, you don't need to go through KYC, you don't need to do anything. And I think if you look at the way Sovryn is and the way it was 2 months ago, 3 months ago, and 4 months ago, the rate at which the UI is improving for Sovryn.app is crazy. At the same time, other people are building out specific UIs which are going to allow you to access the system, for a specific use case. And so that will make things simpler. There are wallets that want to integrate Sovryn directly into the wallet, so you'll just use it through the wallet. I think of Sovryn.app as a reference implementation. It shows what is possible, and will continue to try and show what is possible, but ultimately there's going to be an entire community of front ends built around this. And Sovryn.app will become a place where you can just see the entire ecosystem at once. There's also this myth that Rootstock couldn't handle the Babelfish launch. That's not true. It's just there was right after the hard fork, some of the tech that we had been building needed to be updated to take into account the hard fork, and so there was some disruption. Right now, the Rootstock network and the way we are running our nodes can handle and does handle the load. Gorfiand says, how do you see the future implementation of Rootstock on CEXs, and where do you see Sovryn versus Uniswap versus Pancakeswap in 1 year? I'm not entirely sure I understand what the implementation of Rootstock on CEXs means. So I'm gonna talk about Sovryn versus Uniswap versus Pancakeswap. I don't know where it's gonna be in 1 year. I know that Sovryn is going to be substantially, Sovryn's growing now, will be much bigger in the future, but I don't think that it's going to be as big as Uniswap, because Uniswap has 1 million shitcoins on it. When the bull market's over, then a lot of that value is going to evaporate. Whereas with Sovryn, what I'm hoping we're building is something which is going to be fundamentally powerful, fundamentally good, fundamentally useful today, tomorrow, 6 months, and 10 years, and 100 years down the line. So it's a different design philosophy, it's a different business philosophy, it's a different sort of philosophy around how you make progress. You look at Bitcoin, and Bitcoin has been chugging along slowly for 12 years now. And then, we've got Solana that has come about recently. Solana isn't a competitor to Bitcoin, even if it gets very, very big, because it's this technology play. And it's, Solanas will come and go, Ethereums will come and go, Avalanches will come and go. Bitcoin is designed to be reliable, to be the same thing today as it will be in 10 years and it will be in 50 years. It's something where you can put your retirement money in. You can't put your retirement money into ETH. You can't, as a high net worth investor, put your money into ETH. You can't put you can't buy ETH and just forget it. It's going through hard forks and upgrades and changes all the time. And so if we want to build a financial system that is going to be reliable and is going to last for decades, we need to think on a fundamental level, how do we build those systems? How do we build a financial and economic ecosystem around Bitcoin? And so, I think Sovryn is going to be able to offer things to El Salvador and other countries that Uniswap and Pancakeswap will never use. Pancakeswap is never going to be used by, a nation state. Sovryn, I think there's a very, very good likelihood it will be. So it's a different, I think I was really, really bothered by the ICO mania 4 years ago, until I realized that it was just gambling. It was just a casino, right? And then it made sense to me. It was like a decentralized casino, and I like that. I think a decentralized casino is something which is valuable. I mean, it was a really cool casino. It worked 24/7. It worked globally, and you could think you were particularly clever because you could, try and, you could think, oh, I made a really, really good investment because I did my research, right? Even though you were just gambling. So it was a great casino. But casinos, they can make a lot of money, but they have most people, vast majority of wealth in this world isn't interested in casino. It's interested in solid ways in which it can see a return for decades. And I think that's the much more interesting and much more important thing to be building for. Mike Scara asks, as you probably know, the World Economic Forum recently had an exercise called Cyber Polygon in which they discussed different scenarios of global internet and power outages due to cyber attacks. What is your opinion on Bitcoin and crypto in general if someone pulls an event like that? Can crypto even survive that? So let's say the internet went down. Would Bitcoin survive? Well, first of all, you wouldn't be able to use Bitcoin. You wouldn't be able to use Sovryn. So in a world in which the internet goes down, during the period that it's down, you can't use these things. These systems would survive and come back up with the internet. But the whole digital space, right, everything being built right now assumes that an internet works. Is this a risk model? Yes. Is it one that I care about? Not particularly. I don't think the internet's going anywhere. The internet was designed to survive nuclear attack, That is actually why the internet was invented, right? ARPANET was created so that they would have a digital form of communication that would survive a nuclear holocaust. So I think that the internet would survive a nuclear holocaust and Bitcoin will survive with it. And if it doesn't, if the internet doesn't survive, we've got much bigger problems than what's happening with our Bitcoin bags. From the field asks, how is Sovryn going to gain traction from the larger public in the upcoming months and years? How is Sovryn going to deal with larger traffic? Will the fees stay payable? So I've discussed scaling quite a lot. I'm not going to go back into that, but the answer is I think eventually we'll get to very, very low transaction fees. Most of the fees will just be trade fees, lending fees. The transaction fees will basically go down to near zero. How is Sovryn going to gain traction from the larger public? I think it's. I think you guys can see the efforts that we're doing. You know, I'm constantly trying to communicate. I write for CoinDesk. I write for Bitcoin Magazine. I'm starting to do more of that. I'm starting to make more videos. I'm starting to try and do more Twitter Spaces. We've got the adoption team that is working on it. We have CEXs that will probably list us, which is going to increase awareness. Like there's a million things. There's also, you know, more and more Bitcoiners are talking about Sovryn. More and more influencers are talking about Sovryn. So there's a lot of things that are happening. But I want to turn this question back on you. What are you doing to gain traction for Sovryn? Because ultimately it's up to you guys, right? It's up to the sovereigns themselves. It's up to the people who hold SOV. It's up to the people who use the platform to tell everyone about it, to tweet about it, to retweet about it, to post about it on Reddit. Like, if the more the community, this is a ground-roots effort, a grassroots effort. The more the community evangelize it, the more successful it will be. And again, I'll go back to the analogy of Bitcoin. Bitcoin never had a marketing team. It succeeded, it grew from word of mouth and from the controversy. And so, you know, you guys, ultimately it's in your hands. What are you doing to gain traction for Sovryn, to gain awareness for Sovryn? 17, what do you think of Mintlayer proof of stake mechanism? And what do you think of Mintlayer as a layer 2 alternative for Rootstock? To be honest, I don't like the Mintlayer proof of stake mechanism. I think it's got some other cool aspects, but that particular thing, I've already told the team that I'm not particularly excited about it. And I think, you know, I've spoken in different venues about my issues with proof of stake. I think proof of stake is it is very, very problematic. So yeah, that's my thought, and that's from D4K Blue. Fausto BTC asks, if a project wants to make use of SOV token as a risk mitigation, does the project need to provide its own SOV contracts, stakeholders, or will there be a unified contract to manage risk? And then he says, I would like to have an answer because I would like to use SOV staked for the bridge for mining rewards, for example. This is a good question. Right now, the way the system works is that Sovryn has a treasury of SOV, and if there was a problem, that treasury can be used to correct, to make people whole. But it would be a good thing to get more insurance mechanisms into the system. So, for example, Babelfish, who are part of the Sovryn ecosystem, although not part of the Sovryn protocol, are developing their own and have developed their own sort of insurance mechanism for XUSD. And like you mentioned, I think having something similar for bridges would be a good idea. I actually think that with the bridges, ultimately we're going to get to a point where most of the bridges will be using zero-knowledge proofs, and so there'll be much less risk in them. Almost no risk. Will basically be cryptographic guarantees end to end. But I think introducing a sort of insurance mechanism would be a good idea, and would be a great idea for a sub-DAO, for a sub-protocol. So if someone wants to work on that, reach out to me. Right now, for example, that's one of the things that I don't know of a team that's currently working on that particular project. Question 19 from Wilder. Do you see Sovryn Governance Token becoming an LP base? For example, OG RBTC would pay OG tokens or only SOV tokens? In about 2 or 3 weeks, I think there's going to be a system coming out which will allow different pools to earn rewards in more than just SOV. So a pool could earn rewards in SOV and OG and XUSD, for example. So I think that actually is coming pretty soon. Next question from Leaves Green. BTC Maxis do not like Sovryn as much as I hoped. Why do you think that is? BTC Maxis are dumb. Maximism makes you stupid. That said, I think we're starting to see Bitcoiners, not Maxis, right? I don't really care about Maxis. Maxis are just shouty people. There are not that many of them. But people who are interested in Bitcoin are starting to get more interested. We're seeing, more mentions. We're seeing more people talking about it. We saw the review from Dan Held the other day. It's going to be a process. Bitcoiners are conservative. They want to see things get proved out. And so I've described this in the past. I say, one of the biggest advantages that Sovryn has is being first in the space for Bitcoin. Because time in market is like, it's proof of time for Bitcoiners. And the longer time goes by where a real competitor to Sovryn doesn't emerge, the more obvious it is, the more likely it is that Sovryn just becomes the de facto DeFi layer for Bitcoin, the de facto Bitocracy layer for Bitcoin. Because it will just have been in the market long enough that people trust it, that Bitcoiners trust it. So, in a way, the fact that Bitcoiners take a long time to make a decision and galvanize around something is a great thing for Sovryn. El Ru asks, I have a question regarding the peg in, peg out from Rootstock. I understand that the network inherits the security layer from Bitcoin layer 1 through merge mining, but how can we guarantee the same level of decentralization for the bridged process? I'm aware that on the BTC side there's a multi-sig with hardware secure modules. How secure would you say this process is currently, and what are the plans to improve it in the future? So PowPeg, which is the system which is used to create the Bitcoin peg on Rootstock, is excellent. It's probably the most secure Bitcoin multisig in the world. And it's definitely the most secure Bitcoin peg anywhere. We have mostly developed out a entirely new peg, which has which I think in some ways has advantages over that peg, and we're waiting for the roll up to launch it, because we can't launch it on base layer Rootstock. There are also other options like utilizing something like RGB to create a non-multisig based peg in, peg out mechanism. The overall strategy is this: Sovryn needs to prove the use case, and that's what we're doing now. Right? We're proving that people want to use Sovryn, and people want to be able to use their Bitcoin in layer 2, want to be able to peg their Bitcoin. Once that is obvious, right, as Sovryn gets bigger, then two things happen. One, Sovryn will have more resources to invest in better pegs, and two, the Bitcoin community in general will start to focus more on this issue. And so if I had to guess, I would say that in a few years from now, right, and I don't know if that's 4 years or 5 years or whatever, but we will have totally seamless, totally secure ability to peg, and PowPeg won't be necessary at all, or any other sort of like, even the economic assurances peg that we build out won't be necessary. We just have a pure cryptographic assurances system which gives you almost identical security to Bitcoin layer 1. The next question is from Tom, and Tom asks, How do you think of the Rootstock network congestion and gas wars as Sovryn grows in adoption? A lot of questions have been about that. I don't see this as it's something to be concerned about. It's something to watch. It's something to continue developing on. But I don't see it as a showstopper. I think in the medium term, so over the next 6-8 months, this problem is going to get basically solved. And then Tom also asks, what about limit orders? I think we're going to have limit orders probably before the end of September. So yeah, stay tuned because that's coming. Thanks very much, guys. I look forward to talking to you in the AMA.